Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Hey, everybody. It is Monday morning, November 16th, and we are the Fantasy Footballers, and by we, I mean Jason and myself.
No, Mike. It's,
Where is he, by the way? Is he just late?
I wish he was late. No, he is terrorizing my heart. He is in Disneyland, in California, having fun with the family, staying at the Grand Californian.
It's a two-man show today.
Two-man.
And he is he's on a family trip. He's got the kids and the family and the grandparents and the brothers and the sisters and the Mickey Mouse and the churros and the...
It's the whole big deal.
Yeah, it's the whole big deal. So much so that he's gone all week.
Do you want to know what's nice about him being gone all week?
Oh,
I mean,
I've got a list of like
one of the
450
many things, of course. But we might not. I don't think we can get paid out on our terrible water bet
on the water
while
bet.
he's gone. We got to wait till he's back.
Absolutely.
So there was that.
So that is mind blowing, and apparently everybody that listens to the show was acutely aware of what was taking place. We took a water bet from the listeners, or a listener, that just came out and said, hey, I will bet all three of you that the Lions will upset the Packers in Lambeau. And if he loses, he gets 3 waters. If we lose, we get a water each.
Mike accepted that bet on
our behalf
of us without talking to us, and we were like, yes, good, you should, because there's zero chance.
It was I believe, and I don't have the number exact, I believe it's been since 1991 since the Lions won a game in Lambeau Field. I didn't see this coming at all. This is why people who bet in Vegas cry a lot. I mean, just unbelievable. So, yes, we are due the most improbable of waterings that I think I've ever remembered.
A well-deserved cup of water in the face.
Mike should take all 3.
I completely agree.
He volunteered for it.
And then he leaves and goes to Disneyland. Mike,
yeah,
you get all 3 of the
typical.
waters.
Splash Mountain. That's what we'll call it. So we got a good show for you today. Jason and I are holding down the fort. We got our fantasy rewind. We're going to go through the StudMuffins and the pooped in his big boy pants section. We've got the Monday Night Football preview. We've got the mailbag. And if you want to get a hold of the show, you can do so on Twitter at the FF Ballers. You can check out our website, thefantasyfootballers.com. You can visit our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com. And we're everywhere else, too. We're on YouTube. We're on the Fantasy Sports Network, Facebook. I think we're on Snapchat or something. Mike does that stuff. So, all right, I've got a quick question about defenses, but I got to tell you, here's one of the frustrating things about kickers and defenses. This is our league of record. This is the league I'm trying to come back from 1-4 on, and I think I'm going to get by this week. Maybe undeservedly, I'm going to get by. I'm going to be 6-4, so I'll have a nice winning streak going on. But my opponent had no kicker and defense all week, and he was just waiting to sign one. I had, the Rams at home against Cutler, and I had Brandin McManus, the number 2 kicker of the year, and he just signed anybody
off of waivers.
Off of waivers, kicker and defense. He outscored me 17-1 with his kicker and defense, so I'm still going to get by, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating because the honest truth is defense is the hardest to predict of anything because the most improbable plays can happen on defense. You could have a defense that is great and gets 3 interceptions and returns nothing, where your opponent's defense is terrible and gets a touchdown and outscores your defense.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even the defense's fault. It's the offense.
It's Carson Palmer kicking the ball way up in the air after he fumbles
right.
it. And the truth is, if you want a league that has more predictable defensive scoring, it has to be one with special teams yardage because those numbers are actually more predictable from team to team than it is to not have those. But, yeah, that was frustrating. But let's get to the quick question of the day. Speaking of defenses, people are paying attention to defenses for the sake of playoff schedules, rest of season schedules. Who do you sign early? I prescribe signing a defense extremely early and holding them on your bench, maybe 2 of them. Yes, 2 defenses. Because at this point in time, you're positioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to mention a couple. Who are some surprise rest of season defenses people should go grab right now preparing for the playoffs? Do you have one?
Yeah, I've got one that I've been targeting in all of my leagues. Sometimes you can have them added in a trade. In several of my leagues, I've seen them on the waivers from week to week, and that would be the New England Patriots. The Patriots are a pretty good defense. They're definitely not one of the top defenses, but they are, top half. They're not a bottom feeder type of team. And here's why. They've had a lot of offensive injuries lately. I think that's going to change the game plan slightly to where they're not putting up games that are, 50-40 at the end of the game. But the real main reason is because in their playoff schedule, in weeks 14, 15, and 16, they play the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans, and the New York Jets. Those are games that are going to be very good opportunities for defensive scores, and if they don't happen, they shouldn't be high-scoring offenses against them. So I really like the playoff schedule for the Patriots.
All right, my defense that I think people need to grab, I actually had a claim on them last week that got overridden by some of my other signings. But the Chiefs, okay? The Chiefs have an incredible pass rush. They've got two of 3 games at home during the playoffs, and that's San Diego, Baltimore, Cleveland, okay? So that's not exactly the gauntlet. They have been ascending after an awful stretch. They had 2 games where they were negative, okay? And we're talking weeks ago. They've been in double digits, I think, 4 out of 5 weeks, if something around there. They had a huge week this weekend, obviously, dismantling the injured Peyton Manning. And, before they play their playoff schedule, they still have, Buffalo, San Diego, winnable games. And so I think the Chiefs in the next 6 weeks are actually a really, really good pickup. I'm going to be looking at them again this week. Yeah,
absolutely. We talked weeks ago about the secondary of the Chiefs being a team you wanted to find a quarterback against, but that's not true at all anymore. That was in the very beginning of the year. They have figured out their secondary. That was their whole defensive issue. Their front, line is amazing. Their secondary is solid now, so I really like that pick.
So those are a couple options for you guys out there to snag if you need a defense. Let's go ahead and get into the news.
Weekly Rewind.
All righty, let's kick it off with what Jason just mentioned, some injury concerns again for the Patriots. Julian Edelman goes out with a broken foot. This is the same injury, from my understanding, that Des Bryant suffered. So, surgery today for Edelman. Hope is maybe he returns to the playoffs, but basically he just retired from the fantasy season.
Right. For our purposes, this is a season-ending injury. This is something where, unless you're in one of those wacky leagues that actually plays fantasy football through the playoffs, which don't be in one of those, it's ridiculous. Unless you're doing daily fantasy, then yeah, he's gone. And now with Dion Lewis gone, the 2 short yardage, pass-catching, run-through-the-air type of players. Now I think this really turns the heat up on Danny Amendola. Hopefully, last week we had said, go sign Danny Amendola as a hope stash. Now, we didn't think Edelman was going to get injured, but that was because when Dion Lewis was out previously, he had big weeks. So he hopefully was already stashed. I'm sure on the waiver show tomorrow, he will be one of the main guys claimed.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because the offense is obviously going to, you can't lose 2 of your go-to guys and expect the exact same thing from an offense. At the same time, you can't expect the Patriots not to make some sort of adjustment that impresses you or does something to make somebody else relevant. I have to believe Amendola is the guy that gets the spike, but also that they may have to trust James White more than they do right now because James White was on the field for 28 snaps. LeGarrette Blount was on for 38. White didn't get very much action.
2 touches.
Yeah, 2 touches. He did make an important third down catch. I just think you're going to have to either start trusting him or trust somebody else. LaFell should move up in my mind because, he still was targeted quite a bit in this game. So it's not good news for the Patriots offense, but they're going to have to adjust. And if you're an Edelman owner, well,
sorry.
Yeah.
Go get Amendola. He's not going to be Edelman, but
but they're going to have to lean on him.
Yep.
All right, so what's going on with Johnny Manziel? Mike Pettin said that next week Manziel might start again.
Well, I doubt he starts this next week because they're on bye. However,
right? The next start. Yeah.
The next game. It's too early to tell, but he said that it was his best game as a starter, which it probably was. That's it's not too hard to get there.
That's not saying much.
Yeah, so it's right now it's a wait and see, pretty irrelevant because of the bye week. But next week we'll come in and I think on our show this last week we were pretty confident that McCown was going to get the start.
We were. The last we talked on the show, we thought that it was McCown.
Yeah, so make sure you're following us on Twitter for those last second updates.
Yep. All right, so last night, if you watched the Monday night game, that was a fun game.
Ooh, it was a fun game if
Just
you are
ask
a
Drew
Cardinals
Stanton.
fan. Yeah.
If you haven't seen the clip of Drew Stanton's widest celebration on earth, you need to go to our Twitter page.
You could not be disappointed by taking a second, take a break, and find the image of that Drew Stanton celebration. It is the best celebration I have ever seen.
Really entertaining.
We didn't even get the kick at the end of it.
It's out there. It's
just
been tweeted everywhere by everybody.
You could watch it for an hour. You could just watch it on a loop for an hour, and in minute 40.
As a Cardinal fan, I watched it on a loop for an hour.
It was great.
Yeah.
I tried to do it myself. Pulled a hammy.
I did do it after the game was over.
Yeah.
I definitely did. There was the side punches. Those are the ones that boom, 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 boom.
I did a whole commentary over it for my wife.
Yeah.
It was delightful.
The Rousey.
Yeah.
All right. We won't talk about that. You don't want to talk about
Rowdy.
Wow. Upset.
Yeah, I like it.
Incredible.
I'm a big home fan, so there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So the Philadelphia Daily News reports Sam Bradford, he went out in this game midway through. He was having a pretty good game. Suffered a grade 2 AC joint sprain in his non-throwing shoulder. Do we know anything more about his prognosis? And obviously Sanchez is the guy that stepped in and threw the end zone interception.
Yeah, we know that nothing is, the x-rays came back negative, which is good. It's not anything broken, not the throwing shoulder. We'll have to wait and see in practice whether or not he's going to be the guy or whether Sanchez gets in there. Either way, I don't know that you're excited about really much of anything going on there. The only thing that you could be excited about at this point, this early for next week going forward, would be DeMarco Murray there for the Eagles. They're going to have to run the ball more. Ryan Matthews got hurt. So DeMarco Murray is the only guy I've got a little bit of faith in right now this early of the week for next week.
Yeah, and Bradford's injury was to the non-throwing shoulder. He might miss a game or two would be my guess. All right, Peyton Manning.
Woo! Hall of Fame.
I've never seen a lower score ever. That's the lowest score I've ever seen in our league where you penalize, most leagues penalize for interceptions the way ours does. Do you know what his total was? Did you see it?
I don't know, but I do know this. I was playing against a team that had Peyton, and I was worried. I put up a winnable score, but not like I have to win. I was worried, and then I no longer needed to worry.
Do you want to take a guess?
I'm going to go -5.
-7.1.
Whew, that's nice to play against.
Can you imagine if you were in a position where you that was the game? You just needed a couple points from Peyton.
Here's what I like. I don't think that many of our listeners had a problem playing Peyton Manning, because we've been saying for a month and a half to don't play him, to trade him if you can and get rid of him, but that's no good. And now it's looking like he's going to miss a week. That's the report, is that they're expecting him to miss a week, but it's still very early. Reports came out about, further injuries that he was already playing through and then got even worse. So it might be Brock Osweiler time.
Yeah, torn plantar fascia.
That's
not good.
That's
not good. And generally the prescription for that is rest.
Yep.
So if they're in a position where they feel comfortable, I mean, this isn't very fantasy relevant because we're not saying to start Peyton anyway. So, but it does impact the skill players on Denver. But the truth is, I don't know if it impacts them better or worse right now.
I have to believe that the offense can get better with Peyton being out. Peyton is leading the league in interceptions because he has been throwing bad interceptions. I mean,
they're bad interceptions.
They're not like, oh, it's not his fault, the receiver's not running the right route. He's not playing good. So I think, as crazy as it is, it's a good thing for the Broncos offense to have Osweiler in.
Yeah. All right. Couple quick notes. Justin Hunter, fractured ankle in week 10. Victor Cruz, season-ending calf surgery. What a year for Victor Cruz. Just did nothing at all, which I think was Jason's prediction from the beginning.
Woohoo.
And then,
Sorry, Vic.
And Tony Romo, we expect him back this week.
Yeah.
Just an alert for everybody if he's sitting on waivers for some reason.
Yeah. I don't know. Would you if he's on waivers, do you just stream him? Do you have faith? Week 1, he's coming up against the Dolphins in week 11.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. I mean, we saw Big Ben come off the shelf yesterday and go bananas.
The best backup quarterback I've ever seen was Big Ben.
Yeah, and the worst starting opportunity. I mean, if you're Landry Jones, do you just roll your eyes back in your head? Big Ben's – all the reports came out that morning. I got tweets that were like, do I start Big Ben? I said, no.
Right.
He's the backup. And then, he's active. Yeah, he's active, but it's Landry Jones. He would have to get hurt. 3, 2, 1.
Boom.
Done.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a prediction. I think Big Ben won that starting job from here on out. I think
they're going to announce it in the future.
He took it. Yeah, I mean, they're on bye, so beware of that. But I think he stays the starter. Bold prediction of the week. So before we take a look at some of this week's fantasy stud muffins, we want to thank our sponsor, SeatGeek. The fantasy world is in full swing. The NFL is in full swing. This is the time where you want to go down to the games. The big games are here, and the place to get your tickets are on SeatGeek. You can go to SeatGeek.com. You can download the SeatGeek app for free. I recommend the app. We've used it ourselves. SeatGeek takes in tickets from hundreds of different sellers. You know you're going to get the best price. They have this thing called the deal score in their app on their website. Just shows you the best priced ticket, the quickest and the easiest, and there's no CAPTCHA or crazy system you have to go through. They are quick. They are easy. And for our listeners, you can actually get $20 off your first purchase. So if you're going to go to the game anyways, here's what you do. You download the free SeatGeek app today. Then you enter our promo code, which is footballers, in the app, and SeatGeek will then send you $20 once you've made your first SeatGeek purchase. And every ticket purchased on SeatGeek is backed by a 100% guarantee. So go download the free SeatGeek app and enter promo code footballers today.
Yes, let's get into the stud muffins. I am thinking about making a SeatGeek purchase for the Bengals-Cardinals at-home Sunday night football game next week because that one seems juicy.
Well, if you do, definitely buy an extra ticket for me.
Yeah, will do. All right.
This week's fantasy stud muffins.
Yeah.
I'll be Mike for a second.
Oh my gosh.
Set your phasers to kill.
That was Mike.
That was Mike.
Yes, Kirk Cousins, 20 for 324, 4 touchdowns. Somehow was my start of the week this week. I take no credit for that. Mike left him sitting there on the table. It was like he came to a feast and took the wrong item off.
Well, he was Mike's stream of the week early. We said as a group that we really liked his matchup. On our Tuesday show last week, he was the first guy we said to get off of waivers, and if you did it, you got the first quarterback of the league of the week. The number one quarterback is how I would say that. The first number one quarterback is the proper English.
And as he would say, how do you like that? How do you like that?
Oh, Kirk? Yeah,
Kirk Cousins. So Mike got off the air, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, and just said, in his league, he's like, I'm starting Kirk Cousins this week. Yeah. He knew he was streaming him in the beginning.
And he did. He picked him up, and he played him. And
so he has the Panthers next week.
Yeah, so you can now drop Kirk Cousins.
This is what's incredible to me is that the NFC East is in such a race that Washington's right in it. I mean, they are battling right now, and
Yeah, absolutely, they're in it. This is the Panthers don't have very many tough matchups ahead. People are talking about, is it too early to talk about the Panthers going undefeated? I don't know, but their schedule, this is like one of their harder games, and it's not all that difficult.
So you know what the Panthers do right? They employ all wide receivers that wouldn't matter if they had a Julian Edelman injury.
Right, yeah.
You just roll another guy named Philly Brown into the lineup, and you're fine.
There you go.
So, Kirk Cousins next week. Wouldn't start him against the Panthers in Carolina for sure, but he had a monster game, and hopefully, by the amount of messages on Twitter I got, he won some people some weeks.
Absolutely.
So, and Jordan Reed did well too. So we'll get to that. Big Ben did have a huge week, 22 for 379, 3 touchdowns. As Jason said, the world's best backup. He had a monster week. If you didn't start him, I don't blame you because no one started him.
Yeah, you don't start a guy that's not playing.
Yeah, so if you did,
shame on you and congratulations.
Right. He does have a bye next week, okay? We didn't mention it in the news. I meant to. The Browns, Saints, Giants, and Steelers. The Browns, Saints, Giants, and Steelers are all on bye next week. So I'm not going to put it past Big Ben somehow scoring these type of numbers next week on the bye based on what he did as a backup.
Right, maybe.
But yeah, I wouldn't start him. Aaron Rodgers is in our StudMuffins. And I just don't feel like that's fair.
Well, he was the third highest scoring fantasy quarterback this week, which is why he's there.
I know.
You saw it a couple weeks ago against Carolina. He was terrible. The whole Packers offense was awful, but at the very end of the game in garbage time, he was able to come back, and he ended up as I think like the third highest quarterback that week. So you've got a guy, obviously, an Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame quarterback, fantastic fantasy option. You can still count on him even if it takes garbage time, but there is clearly a problem with the offense of the Packers. And next week at Minnesota, I'm not liking the whole game script from a fantasy perspective. There's probably a lot of guys I'm going to start over Aaron Rodgers next week.
Really? Over him. Wow. Yeah, that was going to be my question. I don't think I have it in me to bench him.
Well, I'm not saying that you would bench him because he deserves to be benched. I'm saying there's probably 5 quarterbacks next week
that will be ranked higher.
That I would rank higher, and if they're higher than him in my rankings, I would start. I mean, I would just go with that and start.
A lot of issues for that team right now. Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams can't get off can't get off of man coverage very often. Not much separation. James Jones has disappeared, literally poofed. I think he's in Disneyland with Mike.
Yeah.
I think he's on Space Mountain right now.
That's the only place he's going to be celebrating.
Yes. So did you have something to add?
I think the problem with the offense is Devontae Adams. He has been thrust into the number 1 role, and he is not a number 1 wide receiver. He had a decent line, right? It was like 10 for 70. He had 21 targets. He was throwing the ball 21 times and finished with a meh fantasy day.
There were 3 or 4 times when he had to make a play and didn't.
Right. I mean, think about
it. It was the type of catches that you had to make.
He could have tied the game on the 2-point conversion at the end.
I blame Rodgers for that, for sure.
It was catchable.
Could have let him. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much agree with you. He needs to be not the guy, but that's the situation they're in now without Jordy. So it's hurting Rodgers. Jay Cutler, once again, big game, huge passing touchdown. 2 of them, one to Langford, one to Zach Miller. He had 3 touchdowns again, and they came in and they pretty much just boat raced the Rams in St. Louis. Did you see that coming?
No, I didn't, but I love it.
Because if you had, you should have told me I started the Rams D. That wasn't smart.
Yeah, well, I was throwing a little bit of shade on Alshon Jeffery last week, saying I would start Mike Evans over Alshon because the combination of this defense, I think they had only given up 2 passing touchdowns through the air all year. They gave up 3 in the first half to Jay Cutler. So clearly we didn't see this coming. None of them went to Alshon, who we'll talk about in a little bit. One of the things that we can point out here, though, since we're talking about quarterbacks, and we prescribe streaming, every week we give you streaming options, because every week it's a different set of guys. Kirk Cousins, Ben Roethlisberger, probably Rodgers, Jay Cutler, and the next guy, Eli Manning, all 5 of those guys probably are not going to be here next week. I mean, several of them are on bye, and they've got Jay Cutler goes against the Broncos next week. Bad matchup. You're probably not going to do it. Kirk Cousins against the Panthers. Every week you got to look for new quarterbacks to plug in there.
Yeah, Cutler had a monster game, but you're right. The matchups say that maybe he's not your stream next week, even though he's been kind of consistent lately. And so he's somebody that you need to maybe – do you put him in the same conversation as Carr at this point? I mean, it's 6-point passingly. He's 24, 23, 24, 23, 24, 36.
He's a guy that has to be rostered. Yeah. At this point, you're getting late and you want the streaming options on your bench rather than just relying from the waivers. And so I would pick up Cutler. I just probably wouldn't play him this coming week.
All right, so who's next on the StudMuffin list here at quarterback?
We got Carson Palmer. Big game late last night against Seattle in Seattle. I mean, you want to talk about a guy. Mike talked about the fact that there has been very little fantasy difference from Carson Palmer between when he faces top-ranked pass defenses and bottom-ranked pass defenses. It's like 1 point different. And right now, after this game, if it's 1 point different, it's going to be 1 point better because he put up 363 yards and 3 touchdowns in Seattle. So great game from Palmer. And then the last guy was my start of the week, Joe Flacco, in a game that we knew was going to see a lot of action through the air. Got over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns as well, playing against the Oakland Raiders. So a lot of good options this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at the wide receiver position, guys that stood out, StudMuffins this week. The big boys, Antonio Brown had another monster game because when him and Big Ben are on the field together, he does this all the time. Brandin Cooks. What do you make of Brandin Cooks' kind of breakout right now? Because he's had a fairly consistent run. He had a big touchdown in this game, 5 for 98, 2 touchdowns. What is he going forward?
He's a very good option. He is a wide receiver 2. He's a guy that you start week in, week out. 2 weeks ago when I had him as my start of the week, I did research between him and Snead because both guys look great, and all the numbers actually said, who I really want out of these two? It's Cooks. And we've seen that since then. Snead puts up a goose egg. Cooks is the guy. Drew Brees has figured it out. But again, bye week next week, so don't play him.
Yeah. It was an impressive game. He's been in double digits for a while now. He seems more reliable than he had been in the beginning of the year. The offense just kind of hit a wall, though, in that game. That game seemed like it was heading towards shootout, and then it was over. So Martavis Bryant, monster game for him, showing that, we talked a lot in the beginning of the season. Do you like the combos, right? Like Brown and Bryant. If they're on a team like that, you can. I mean, I believe the number for Antonio Brown was he put up a 37-point game in our league, 34.
Yeah.
2 touchdowns. Well, Martavis Bryant just put up 6 for 178 and a touchdown.
Yeah, if you started both of those guys from the same offense in the same game, you had 2 of the top 4 wide receivers. That's incredible.
Yeah, he had a huge, huge week. Who do they have next week? They have
nobody.
Right, they're on bye. Yep. So don't start him.
A lot of bye weeks.
Yeah. All right, Doug Baldwin had a big game against the Cardinals last night, 7 for 134 and a touchdown. You treat him like you treat all Seattle wide receivers, which is
bench them.
Yeah, bench them because you don't expect it to happen.
It's gonna be someone every week who has the game, but predicting whether it's Lockett or
I will say
Baldwin
Paul Richardson pulled his hammy after kind of seemingly being involved, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham Jr. had 4 for 104 and a touchdown. Mike Evans was 8 for 126, and I don't know how many drops he had. I know he had a few.
Yeah, he had a couple.
I knew he had a couple that one would have put him right down in the red zone. But he came through. They got the win. Cowboys have lost 7 straight games, I believe. Eric Decker, not to be forgotten on Thursday Night Football, just keeps Eric Deckering.
He's my favorite player. I just, it's like him.
You like him.
And Alan Hearns, to me, are the same exact guy on different offenses. They are the main red zone threat for their team. They're the guys that are looked at, even though they've got other great options in Brandon Marshall and
Allen Robinson. You know who he is to me? He's what Anquan Bolden was when he was in Arizona. Because he's not really a 2. It's 1A, 1B.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know this when a team – he has 6 catches, by the way, in 4 straight weeks. And you know this when a team looks to him in the red zone. When you have a guy that you're willing to look at in the red zone that's a 2, you know you have a 1B, not a 2.
Yep.
So he had a big game, and then who else do we have? Travis Benjamin bounced back.
Great to see with Johnny Manziel in there. It gives you a little bit more faith that if after the bye they come back with Manziel as the starter, both him and Barnage both had decent games with Manziel. So a little bit more faith in the passing options despite the quarterback change.
All right, here's one I got wrong, guys. Jeremy Langford.
Well, you got him right a week early.
Yeah, but I didn't see this coming against St. Louis's defense in St. Louis with the possibility that Forte was going to be there or not. I think we all thought he'd be out, but I didn't see this coming. An absolute monster game from Langford, 20 for 73 and a touchdown on the ground, but more importantly, 7 for 109 and a touchdown through the air. Just pretty much a dominant performance by the entire offense there, minus one player that we'll get to in a little bit. But Langford, what do you even do with him as a fantasy owner? Because Forte's coming back. Mike said last week Forte just steps right back in. I completely agree with that. It doesn't mean he won't have a little ancillary role, but you don't. I mean, what do you do?
You start him. If Forte is back, you don't start him. He could still be okay. I mean, we saw earlier in the year he vultured a couple touchdowns from Forte, so he could be used in that role. But I don't want to trust that. I would expect against the Broncos, Forte sits one more week, And even though it's a good, tough matchup, at this point, you have to put Langford as a running back 1 next week against the Broncos if Forte's out.
Speaking of running back 1s next week, Char West has to be.
Absolutely.
And he plays the Chargers next week, and their porous run defense. This week he was 24 for 69 and a touchdown, and then through the air, 3 for 91 and a touchdown.
Yeah, and Niall Davis wasn't even the backup.
He was inactive.
Yeah, I mean, Niall Davis was a healthy scratch. That's because they have plenty of faith in West. Charcandrick West is the guy, and he's running, he's making people forget a little bit about Jamal Charles because he's doing enough.
If you went and grabbed him as the Charles owner, you're pretty happy right now.
Absolutely.
The same way that you are, if you're a Forte owner and you grab Langford and you get those 2 games out of it,
This is why heading into the playoffs, we've been saying this the last week or 2, if you're headed to the playoffs, this is time to get your handcuffs now because these guys can step up when your stud goes down and you've got a guy to play that could step up and be big.
For instance, if you are a Marshawn Lynch owner, you might want to sign Thomas Rawls off the waiver wire.
Yeah.
When Lynch is dealing with abdominal
snowman.
Yes. That's
or if you're the Lamar Miller owner, the next, one of the next guys on our list, you grab Ajayi.
So let me get some perspective there on West real quick. Rest of season, I want you to answer some of these for me. Char West or Lamar Miller?
I think I'm gonna go Char West because he doesn't have anybody behind him that could really impede his carries. He's been playing great, and I think Ajayi, as the season goes on, could get more and more involved.
Char West or Christopher Ivory?
That's tough. I'm gonna go with Ivory. Surprisingly, I think because his red zone usage has just been fantastic. They're a team where if they get on the goal line, they're gonna give him the chance to score. And he looked fresh to me this last week. He gets 10 days of rest. So
Char West, last one. Char West or Justin Forsett?
I will go Forsett on that. Forsett's usage, he didn't have a very good week this week, but his usage has been great. The offense moves. He's involved in the passing game. So I'm going to go Forsett.
All right, big games from Adrian Peterson. If you've heard of him, 26 for 203 and a touchdown. Lamar Miller had another good game. Not so much on the ground. He was out yardaged. That's a professional phrase right there.
Oh, yeah.
Out yardaged by Jay Ajayi despite 10 less carries. He was 16 for 43, but he did get 6 for 50 and a touchdown through the air to salvage his fantasy day.
Well, we've seen this a lot this year from Lamar Miller. His usage in the passing game is what gives you confidence in starting him because he's game flow kind of proof right now, so long as they don't destroy someone and take him out of the game.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit on Friday. LaShawn McCoy had a big game. Love McCoy moving forward.
Yeah.
As long as he can stay healthy, which has been a problem. Jonathan Stewart, another game with 20-plus carries, another productive game, got into the end zone. He had a couple other end zone chances he missed out on.
He had that early touchdown, and I was worried because we have the water bet between LaShawn McCoy and Jonathan Stewart. And I was worried at the beginning, but LaShawn McCoy, he finished ahead. So you get wet. With the Wheel of Water app.
There were a bunch of videos that came through this weekend.
Oh, they're so great.
So if you have, it makes sense, right? Like if you made a bunch of bets with people and the weekend happened and the games happened and you're going to pay those out, videotape them and then post them to Twitter and use the hashtag Wheel of Water. And we will retweet those and enjoy them immensely. There was another English channel, Water Bet, which is just the best to watch.
Yeah.
So
my children were playing with the app just for fun, and they got an English channel, and so I got to watch Jersey.
They did it to one another?
Yep.
Yeah. Caleb was playing with it this weekend, and he goes, if you did this to me, that'd be fun, right? And I'm like, I'm like, yeah, you can go ahead and spin the wheel, buddy. So, all right, let's move on now to the tight end position where Zach Miller is just coming out of nowhere.
Is he the next Gary Barnidge?
He was the first Gary Barnidge.
Well, long ago. But, I mean, Zach Miller, he had that incredible catch last week of that bullet pass. Then
I've got an easy answer for you.
Great.
No.
Yeah, I know.
The answer is no.
That is an easy answer. He's not even the main target, generally speaking, on that offense for the tight end position. Martellus Bennett's there. One of Zach Miller's long touchdown runs was kind of a broken play by the defense.
They ran into one another, and he burst through. It was kind of strange to watch.
It was like a 70-yard touchdown.
I believe it was 87 yards.
Wow.
I think it was an 87-yard
It was
touchdown.
long. So
yeah, and the truth is I say no because he has a total of 10 catches on the entire season. He has all of his fantasy production in the past 2 weeks from touchdowns. And big play, yes. Don't panic, Martellus owners. Don't panic and go sign Zach Miller and drop Martellus Bennett or do something crazy.
Agreed.
But credit where credit is due. Huge games from Zach Miller. Very, very good games. Now, Rob Gronkowski.
If he's on your waivers, sign him. He should be on every roster.
Right.
Very good.
Right. Gronk, another big game. Jordan Reed was Mike's start of the week, and he got it done with touchdowns.
Yeah.
In zone touchdowns.
The best kind. He got 2 touchdowns, 3 for 29. Rule 86. If Jordan Reed is healthy, you play him.
Yeah. And then Brent Selleck, 4 for 100. He's in the Zach Miller category here where he had a big game. It just goes to show that right now you can't trust the tight end in Philly.
Right. For sure.
And then Gary Barnidge, nice bounce back game for him, 6 for 65 and a touchdown. He's highly targeted.
It's also that was an important game being with Manziel. Now you can trust him regardless of the quarterback.
All right, let's talk about the other side of the coin, the guys that didn't do so well this week.
Pooped in his big boy pants.
It might be done. It might be over. I don't think Peyton Manning will be started by a fantasy football player again. Do you agree or disagree? True or false?
I think, Peyton, you got your record. You hold it alone. You beat Brett Favre, and it's time to hang him up.
Do you think that this is going to be a bad memory for him then? Because the game started, he got the record on the first pass, and then he had probably the worst game of his career.
I think it will be a bad memory for him for several weeks. And then after that, he will have that record forever, and we'll forget about how it came in that game because how it came over an entire career. So it'll be a great memory in the long run, but I'm sure it has a very sour taste. And yeah, from a fantasy football perspective, Peyton Manning is done. I don't even think you're going to be able to package him and get value for him anywhere now.
Oh, no.
So at this point, just drop him.
You know, Rule 87 is that when Peyton Manning scores negative 7.1, you can't trade him for anybody.
Right.
Yeah, so running backs, all right. Not a lot of guys that completely pooped their pants, but there were several that did not have good games. Darren McFadden is really the headliner. He wasn't terrible.
No, he didn't
by
put
a quantity
egg,
perspective, but 17 for 32?
Man, that is still about double the yards per carry that Joyke Bell got.
Well,
he was like 15 for 17.
Well, they can't run the ball. They've decided it's going to be a season-long thing there. They're just not going to be – and they won.
You know what, though? Darren McFadden, don't be afraid of him going forward. Tony Romo is now going to be back. He's going to take the boxes and open them up. So Darren McFadden is still going to be the guy. You saw 17 carries this last game. I don't expect that to change, but I expect the defense he's running against to change. So I like him. The guy you should be really unhappy with, C.J. Anderson, you saw in that last game. Now, granted, it was a complete, mess for the Broncos all around, but he wasn't the guy. Ronnie Hillman was the guy. He only had 2 carries the whole game, and those came later after it was like out of touch. So Ronnie Hillman is the back you want there, I believe.
And then Antonio Andrews, you have to mention him because you were starting to think, well, maybe I can actually trust this guy a little bit. He had a terrible matchup against Carolina. They were at home, but 11 for 8. Come on, Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect
somebody
a little
flexed him out this week.
For sure, but it was a bad matchup. I mean, you've seen a lot of decent running backs. Frank Gore, who's been great this year, had a terrible game against Carolina. So,
quick sidebar. One of the things that you notice, the talent levels are what influence the matchup so much. You have a guy, even Doug Martin's been a little bit of a victim to this, but when you have these tough run matchups, if you're just a volume back like Antonio Andrews really was, he wasn't like this guy's going to set the world on fire. It was, okay, he's going to get all the carries.
Right.
So when those guys run into matchups like that, it is trouble in fantasy football.
Yeah,
it is trouble.
It's a very good point.
So, all right, let's talk about the onslaught of wide receiver disappointment.
Oh, man, there were a ton of wide receivers who
tell
put
everybody
up,
what you did in our league.
Yeah, so despite my own words last week, so I have I've got what I at least thought was a great wide receiver core of Allen Robinson and Alshon Jeffery, Randall Cobb, and Mike Evans. I needed 3 of those, and so originally I had sat Mike Evans, but I had said to a lot of people that I would think because of the injury to Alshon, the matchup, that you should play Mike Evans over Alshon. So I put Evans in my lineup. I was happy with it, and last minute, Sunday morning, I made the swap back. But it's all right. I'm still going to win. Go 8-2.
So
lead the league.
Alshon 3 for 23. Jeffery was maybe getting his snaps managed a little bit based on the groin injury reports.
Yeah. And he's got another terrible matchup this next week. Still probably, some lingering effects of the groin. So, I don't see him. I think rest of season, he's a clear wide receiver 1, but he's going to have another middling game. I expect it to be better than this next week, but, a wide receiver 2 next week.
What's going on with Stefon Diggs?
Not a whole lot, and that's the problem with being the number one. He had 3 for 42, but he's the number 1 wide receiver for a team that does not air it out a whole lot. The Minnesota Vikings have just not done anything through the air, and that's why they got Teddy Bridgewater. That's why they're running with Adrian Peterson. They got a guy who's going to slow the game down, be better for a defensive team, not make a lot of mistakes because he doesn't take a lot of risks. And that's just not good for Stefon Diggs.
What do you do with Diggs next week against the Packers?
I think you put him in that flex consideration still because he is the number 1. The Packers, you got to watch with Green Bay and see if their cornerbacks are healthy next week. That's been a big change, whether they've got a good or bad defense. So he's a flex consideration next week.
Jordan Matthews, 3 for 21. Jeremy Maclin, 3 for 17. Sammy Watkins, 3 for 14. Let's talk about those 3, and then we'll get to the gooses.
Yeah.
Let's get to the gaggle. We'll get to the gaggle of terrible wide receiver play.
Yeah, so Jordan Matthew, Jeremy Maclin, Sammy Watkins. Some of these were matchup. I think Sammy Watkins, he had a very bad matchup. We didn't expect big things from him this week. Jordan Matthews, he had come off of a really good game. His floor looked to be higher, but you had 2 problems in this game. One, did you see the hit he took? Oh, it was legal, but it was
I did not
brutal.
See it.
He got smashed. I couldn't even believe he came back in the game. He was down for a minute or 2, so there was that, and then, of course, the quarterback change. So, we did see Mark Sanchez, when he played, that Jordan Matthews was a favorite target of his. We'll have to wait and see the health of both of these guys going forward. I still think Jordan Matthews is a flex play. Jeremy Maclin just wasn't very involved, which was surprising considering the Chiefs.
They just didn't need to throw the ball.
Yeah, they were running all day.
Yeah.
Charcandrick West was going through.
Between Jordan Matthews and Stefon Diggs, next week Matthews has the Buccaneers. Would you rather start Matthews against the Bucs or Stefon Diggs against the Packers?
If he's healthy and
early prediction.
Yeah, early prediction. If he is practicing in full, I would go with Jordan Matthews.
All right, here's the gaggle of gooses. Emmanuel Sanders, 0. Willie Snead, 0. James Jones, 0. John Brown, 0.
Those are guys that you didn't want to play.
3 targets for John Brown, no catches. James Jones, 2 targets, no catches. Willie Snead played the whole game after being limited, one target, no catches. And Emmanuel Sanders, he did leave the game briefly to be evaluated for a concussion. He was cleared. He never checked back into the game.
4 targets.
And he completely goosed.
Yeah, that's no good. One of the things that we see with some of these guys, Emmanuel Sanders, Willie Snead, both of them didn't practice all week. Same with Alshon Jeffery, right? He was limited in practice this week. We're getting to the point.
So is Peyton. Peyton was limited all week, and they threw him out there.
Yeah. So, and I think they said they regretted that, and they should have sat him. I'm sure the record played into it. But what you see here is that defenses have enough game tape right now to know what offenses are doing. When a guy is actually limited physically, it makes a difference in decent matchups. So here you've got guys where that's where I'm saying if Jordan Matthews is limited all week in practice, that's going to affect my decision as to whether I start him next week. It should have with Sanders, with Snead. And James Jones, man, he's just looking his age. He's looking kind of what we thought. He had another red zone target, threw the touchdown right into his belly, and he just kind of let it squeak through his legs.
Teams are figuring out what to do with Green Bay, where they leave Rodgers in the pocket and they man up on these wide receivers, and the wide receivers can't get separation, and he can't get out of the pocket and make something happen.
Yeah. They could really use Jeff Janis to get better because he's about the only guy that has –
or make Montgomery to be able to play.
Yeah, that would definitely
him.
help. But I think what they're really missing is that guy who can fly, that guy who can stretch the field with separation.
Jordy Nelson was one of those guys.
Oh, they should get him back. He's very good.
All right, tight ends. Ben Watson disappointed you, 3 for 19, and so did Martellus Bennett, 3 for 18. I'm fine starting both going forward. It's what happens at tight end position. So
I would rather have Benjamin Watson over Martellus Bennett. And
then barely worth speaking of, but Jordan Cameron, Rudolph, and Julius Thomas all stunk too. But hopefully you weren't starting them or streaming them. Couple kickers, bad games from a couple kickers. That's going to happen. McManus, obviously, they got into field goal range a few times, but they were down so much they were just going for it on fourth down. And Justin Tucker kind of had a bad game. That game flow just went that direction. There was some 2-point conversion attempts. It's going to happen. Both those guys are starting kickers going forward, and that's all I'm going to talk about. Kickers, Monday night game. I want to talk about it for just a second. We got the Texans at the Bengals.
Yeah.
Dalton, Green, Marvin Jones, Gio, Hill, Eifert, any of those guys you're sitting down?
None of them. Not one of them.
You got a feeling about which running back's going to be better tonight?
I
mean, Mike's not here, so there's no one to rip their shirt off and talk about Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, I think that the better running back tonight is going to be Gio. If you're looking for a higher upside, it would probably be Hill because you've got a
touchdowns.
Exactly. If one of these guys scores 2 touchdowns, I'm going to assume it's Hill. But otherwise, Gio's going to be used in both the run game and the pass game. And against this type of defense, I mean, you get Jeremy Hill in space, get him a couple of those little dump-offs against a team that isn't tackling, and Gio could, take one for 40 yards. So I like Gio better in this game. And I think that this is a little bit of a trap. I mean, it's too late, right? Whoever you've decided to play, you're playing. But Hoyer's been great in garbage time. He's been very, very good, but I don't think it happens this game. The Bengals have been up on a lot of teams, and they haven't given up a lot of garbage production the way that take New England, right? New England and the Bengals both have a decent defense, and both have incredible offenses. But the opposing teams in the fourth quarter have been scoring and having garbage success, even though it doesn't matter, against New England through the season. That hasn't been happening on the Bengals. So, I expect Hopkins will be great. Hoyer could be fine. What I'm watching from Houston's side is I want to see if Nate Washington remains the number 2 or if Cecil Shorts takes over that role.
So you're pushing all in. You're betting on one guy. For me, it's Washington. Is it Washington for you?
It would be Washington, yeah. He's played too good, and Shorts shouldn't overtake that position.
And then is Alfred Blue the quantity guy tonight, or is it going to be just Polk out there in third down because they're coming back?
I think you're going to have both. You'll have Blue being the quantity guy in the first half and Polk being the necessary guy in the second half, so, both irrelevant.
I'm going to be just completely, patently, horribly wrong and mocked for this, but I think the game's going to be closer than you think.
Great.
And yeah, so I think it's going to be a closer game. I think the Bengals win it, but I think it's going to be not a blowout. And then the Chiefs, were the Chiefs my upset pick?
They sure were. They were your almost upset who destroyed the previously esteemed Broncos, who now are not looking that great. A couple weeks ago, it was like, oh, they shut down the Packers. Maybe that wasn't as tough as we thought. The Lions just shut down the Packers.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny how things kind of play out. And by the way, I'm not going to give myself any credit for almost upset of the week if the team gets a dominating upset. I'm only going to take credit if the Chiefs had lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
That's how you succeed on the year. So
boo your pick.
Yeah, we're going to take a couple quick minutes and answer some questions from the Foot Clan, the listeners of the show. If you want to ask us a question, it's easy. You go to the website, thefantasyfootballers.com. Click on the Submit a Question button in the upper right-hand corner. You can also call us, leave us a voicemail message. The number for that is 302-464-TFFB, 302-464-TFFB. Let's answer a couple questions.
Mailbag.
Oh, Jason.
I tried.
It's so cute.
Yeah. There you go. I'll get better at as the week goes on.
Somewhere Mike is eating a churro and
gagging,
cursing your name. Yeah. Mike's also probably going to lose this week in our league of record, and I'm delighted.
Woo-hoo.
I'm delighted because I'll have the same record as him. You hear that, Mike? Wherever you are, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, I'll be looking down at both of you.
Yeah, shut up. All right, Benjamin in New York City.
New York City?
At this point in the season, should I sell Brandin Cooks high or keep him and hope for the production he's been getting?
You keep him. I think he's a decent option. I don't think you're going to really
Depends
sell
what
him
high means, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's going to get the production he's been having the last 2 weeks, but he's a great play, and I would hold on to him.
All right, Jack in Phoenix, who would you start week 11? All right, that's an early question.
Wow.
Very early week 11 question. So early impression. Jarvis Landry against the Cowboys, Danny Amendola against the Bills, or Sammy Watkins against the Patriots?
Wow, I'm actually going to this is early. Well, he makes the details say standard league. In a standard league, I'm probably going to go Sammy Watkins. Think the Patriots can be passed on, and he has a better chance at a touchdown. But Danny Amendola, if it was a PPR, I'd have him ahead.
You'd take Amendola over Landry in a PPR?
Yeah, the Cowboys have a really good defense. Danny Amendola, I'm expecting big things.
All right, I would go Watkins, then Landry, then Amendola myself. All right, King in Grand Prairie, Texas. Like kangaroo.
Yeah, hi King.
Hi King Guru. Who is more likely to have a better game tonight? Cecil Shorts or Nate Washington? Needs 3 points to be a victor tonight. Well, you got to go with the guys put it up most recently, right? If you need 3 points, there's no way Nate Washington. Oh, great. This happened once before. Remember when somebody needed either Moncrief or Hilton
Here's the
on
truth.
the Monday night game and
Here's
neither got it?
Hoyer's not the guy that spreads it around to 10 targets. He's a guy that locks in on your number one, and he's been going to the number two. So the question is really Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien's going to decide who that two is, and that's the guy that's going to get it done. So I'm going to say that Bill O'Brien should do Nate Washington, keep him in that role. He's been doing it. But I could very much see Cecil Shorts, you're back, you're healthy, you're back into that role.
But that's not how they run the offense. Cecil Shorts is a slot. They're three wide. I mean, Nate's on the outside. Hopkins is on the outside. Cecil's on the slot, so he's probable to come back in the slot. I think that both guys will be targeted and both will get you 3 points.
Well, you saw in the beginning of the year when Cease was there, he was in that number two role. And if you look, I do agree.
You know what I mean? No, he's not really a number two.
Yes.
It's not like he's the number two guy.
He's not an outside guy. So both of us say go with Nate Washington.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, last one. RJ in South Jersey. What is a good approach to waivers when it comes to streaming quarterbacks? Is there a guy you should be targeting and use your waiver wire priority weekly to pick up? Or wait and see who clears waivers and take your guy off the scrap heap?
Generally, I will always go when the waivers go, and I'm going to take my guess at the best guy that's available because I don't know who's going to be dropped. And I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm so certain that someone great's going to be dropped. Now, I will always look the next day and be like, oh, somebody dropped so-and-so. They're better than who I picked up. But you've got to try to win on your terms and go for it, and you can only do that on waiver day.
Yeah, I would say the only way you want to wait for a guy to slide through is if you already have a Derek Carr on your roster, a Blake Bortles on your roster, where you might not want to start him every week, so you might start somebody over him, but you're okay starting him.
Yeah,
you're fine.
Yeah, then you can let the waiver go and see what happens. But if you need a guy this week, go get him.
Yeah. So that does it for today's two-man show. No Mike. He'll be back next week after he has his fill of Disneyland with the family. So we miss you, Mike. Not really. And any final words?
I'm going to Disneyland. I will not be here tomorrow.
You're just, every time I bring that up, you're just bitter.
I just want to go to Disneyland so bad.
You really like Disneyland a lot.
You know, I'm a family man, and I love taking my kiddos. And
you would go whether you had kids or not.
I did before I had kids, but now they're a good excuse.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.